This is the early morning of the 6th of November. I had a difficult time sleeping again last night. My mind's racing all over the place. I posted a couple of clips yesterday, actually quite a few. The last two that I posted were reportedly Charlie Kirk is still alive. He was never shot, part 1 and part 2. And it got me thinking about all of the other false flag events. But I want to spend a little bit of time on those two videos. How could the cross-eyed FBI director get this so wrong? If you go back and look at the videos that I did when this thing first reportedly took place, I said I didn't believe it was real. That thing in his chest looked like a blood bag, and it blew up and came out the side, and that blood coming out wasn't normal, the way it gushed out. And then that bombardier jet that left Provo, Utah, and went to Page, Arizona, stayed on the ground for 15 minutes and then returned again. That didn't make any sense. And this young kid who said he's the shooter, and a clip of him on the roof walking with no shadow when he hits the white part of the roof, it was all CGI. But this doesn't really shock me too much. Reason being, I've made probably a couple of hundred videos on 9/11. And I want to talk about some of the anomalies about 9/11 that some of you might not have been made aware of. Let's talk about the Pentagon attack. Now, we're told that the aircraft that hit it, I believe it was a 757, impacted the Pentagon at around 500 miles an hour. Well, an airplane can't go that fast at sea level. The air is too thick and too dense. It would literally rip itself apart. We were told that as the aircraft came in, it hit, I think, 2 or 3 steel lampposts. Do you have any idea what would happen if the wing of an airplane hit a steel lamppost at 200 miles an hour? The airplane would cartwheel and blow up. And then you don't have any ground scars. The engines on a 757 or 767 hang below the fuselage. And the hole in the wall is pretty much at ground level, so that would make the ground scars rather significant. And you know what part of the Pentagon got hit? The accounting offices. Why would they be the target? Well, Donald Rumsfeld, who was Secretary of Defense, said the day before that 2.3 trillion was missing from the Pentagon. So by taking out the accounting office, I think they killed like 26 accountants, but they also destroyed the paper trail. And only one camera worked at the most secure building in the entire world. They went around, they meaning the FBI, and they collected videotapes from all the hotels and offices and restaurants and buildings in the area. Not just there, but at the Twin Towers as well. The reason they did that is that it would have shown there were no airplanes at the Twin Towers or at the Pentagon. What hit the Pentagon was a cruise missile or a Tomahawk missile. You got the big burn marks at the top of the hole in the building. How do you get burn marks at the top of the hole? What's in an airplane to burn other than fuel? And the hole doesn't show any wing marks or engine marks. Those engines would have gone through like torpedoes, but there weren't any. Now, let's flip over to Shanksville. let's roll. A woman was driving her minivan, and apparently, she said, a white object flew right in front of her. It was a cruise missile or a Tomahawk missile. They had to create an impact mark at that mine opening. So they hit it with a Tomahawk or cruise missile. They say they found the employment card of one of the stewardesses, a cardboard card or a plastic card. And she was the one that was reportedly on the phone with her husband on her cell phone, telling them or him that they were hijacked. The problem is cell phones didn't work at altitude. I mean, the whole thing is just absolute bullshit. And let's now flip over to the Twin Towers. Don't know if you know this, but the Twin Towers were built in a bathtub. And that was to keep the ocean out. They had to turn the building to dust, because if the entire building weight fell, it would have destroyed the bathtub. So they hit it with an energy weapon. And you can see 52 by 48 inch steel columns flying through the air, turning to dust. You can actually see that. How's that possible? Now, the Bank of Nova Scotia had a vault in the basement of one of the buildings. And when they finally cleared out the rubble after about 3 or 4 weeks, because it burned for that period of time, because nanothermite, you can't put it out once it starts burning, because it creates its own oxygen. And the only organization in the world that makes nanothermite is the United States. And they needed a whole shitload of nanothermite to bring down the building. They also found columns cut on a certain angle to help it fall. Again, you can't make this stuff up. You know why they took out building 1 and 2? Well, the building was full of asbestos. And what does asbestos do? It protects the steel from burning. But it's carcinogenic, so they had to remove it. The cost to remove it would have been mind-blowing. The guy that had the lease on the building, he didn't go to work that day. Neither did his daughter or son. And they both used to work with him. They used to have breakfast up at the very top of the Twin Towers. He got paid twice because he said there were 2 separate attacks. He made a couple of $1 billion on each attack because he had it insured. Now, Marvin Bush, George Bush's brother, worked for a company that provided security to the Twin Towers. And the weekend before the takedown, they turned off all the power. That's because that's when they set the fuses. Now, those columns were 52 inches by 48 inches box steel. I think they're about 3.5 feet apart. They were very, very close together. That's why the windows were so narrow. And have you ever seen what happens when a 747 or 757 or a 737 hits a bird? Punches a hole through the nose of the aircraft. Do you have any idea what would happen if a real airplane hit the front of a building built like that? One of the problems that the Twin Tower had was lack of occupancy. And the reason that had lack of occupancy is it had an 8-foot high ceiling. The outside of the building was an exoskeleton. That's what supported the entire floors. They did have a column going up for the elevator shafts, but there were no steel columns. It was all open space. Absolute bullshit. Now, they did find some airplane parts. They found a landing gear with the wheel or the tire intact. not melted, not burned, probably still full of air. That landing gear also had an brake assembly. Don't know if you know this, but every component on a jet has a unique serial number specific to that jet. And the reason that is that they require service at certain intervals. And the only way they can determine which item needs to be serviced is if it had its own unique serial number. They know exactly what plane that landing gear came from. They also said they found an engine. Well, the problem is the engine belonged to a 747, not a 757. But people bought the hysteria, and that's what it was. You know, I was sound asleep when my son called me. He was at the Air Force Base in Mississippi, and he's crying. He says, Dad, turn on the TV, turn on the TV. I said, what's wrong, Aaron? He says, turn on the TV. I turn on the TV. I say, Aaron, I don't want to watch a horror show. He says, Dad, that's really happening, Dad. The other thing that really nails the government being involved is the FAA was complicit. They faked the radar hits, they faked the radio transmissions, they faked a lot of it. There were 2 F-16 pilots that were sent up to intercept, and they were told to crash into the airplanes. One should hit the front, one should hit the back. They didn't have any weapons. They weren't armed. Why? Because they were supposed to be doing some kind of drill. Whole thing's bullshit. Now, why did they take down the Twin Towers? Well, George H.W. Bush took out what's called Brady bonds, which were an obligation for billions of dollars. They were due on 9/12/01. They were stored at the 93rd floor of the financial institution. The CEO of that company didn't go to work that day. His little daughter started school. A lot of his employees got vaporized, but so did the Brady bonds. And taking down the Twin Towers and blaming a Muslim allowed George W. Bush, the son, to drag us into a 20-year war in Afghanistan. The whole thing was bullshit. And anyone, even half awake, if they look at the pieces of the puzzle, and I just gave you a quick snapshot. I mean, I've probably put over 200 videos on 9/11. That's why I can talk the way I can talk. I'm not looking at any notes. I'm just going off of memory. Absolute bullshit. Oh, and by the way, a number of people made an awful lot of money because they sold United and American short because they knew what was going to happen. And these people are so greedy, they went ahead and they did that. Don't know if they ever got paid, but they did sell it short. And Boeing knew exactly which planes or those parts came from. But all they said is, oh, it came from a 767. Oh, it came from a 757. They know exactly which one it came from. Our government did all of that. Every last piece of it. I think they're up to their eyeballs in this thing with Charlie Kirk. I don't know why they would be, but I think they were. They were up to their eyeballs in Route 91. That was a gunship helicopter, and they know that because they got the bodies. They had a lot of bodies, and those bodies had those bullets in them, and they weren't 223 and 556. They had to come up with a high rate of fire, so they said the shooter was using bump stocks. I've shot bump stocks. They sound like a zipper because there's no belt. what these machine guns were shooting were belt-driven bullets. They're going ba, 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 ba. There was a slight gap in between each shot. There wouldn't be any with a bump stock. How do I know? Again, I've shot bump stocks. The whole thing is bullshit. Let's talk about Parkland. Cruz is serving a life sentence in prison. They accuse him of being the shooter. Well, the problem is that a helicopter captured 4 men leaving a side door of an active shooting scene at Parkland. And they were carrying a duffel bag. You know what was in a duffel bag? Their AR-15s and their helmets and their uniforms. And they dropped it into the bed of a government-issued F-150 Ford. How do you know it was a government issue? Had the little white lights flashing on the bumperettes. Nobody investigated them. The school teacher said that she looked down the hall and she said, "What are they doing here?" She said she saw what appeared to be a policeman wearing a helmet, flak vest. He shot at her, grazed her arm. The teacher in the next class got shot in the head. He was killed. Folks, why did they do Parkland? Well, they want to get rid of our guns. It was another one of those attempts. No different than Barack Obama and Fast and Furious. I could go on and on and on. Like I said, folks, I've done this for almost 14 years, every single morning, 7 days a week. Problem is, who are you going to go to? You're going to go to that cross-eyed FBI director? You're going to go to that stupid blonde bitch, Pam Bondi? Donald Trump's bitch that does whatever Donald Trump wants her to do? This country is a real mess. Anyway, I blabbed enough. I hope you take the time to listen. Hope to take time to like, subscribe, and pass it along to your like-minded friends. Nobody does for you what I do. Why? Because nobody's that stupid.